All right, we might make a start now. Good morning and welcome everyone. I'm Dan Keeley, the Executive Director of the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program at the Essential Services Commission, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we're joining this meeting from. For me, that's the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and elders of other communities who might be joining us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for our annual Victorian Energy Upgrades Industry Forum. We've got a range of really good speakers from the Commission and Solar Victoria presenting today. You'll hear some updates, you'll hear about our priorities, key bits of data, trends and other relevant topics. And there'll also be an opportunity for questions at the end. I'd also like to thank those of you who completed the survey in advance of this session to help inform the agenda. Before we get started, a little housekeeping. We are recording the session. All microphones, apart from presenters, are muted so we can all hear clearly, but there will be time for questions after presentations and we'll respond to as many as we can get to. The video recording, presentations and responses to questions, including those that we don't get to today, will be shared on our website. You can submit a question anytime during the forum. As shown on the screen, you can submit a question by selecting the Q&A button in the menu, or if you're on a mobile device, click the three dots in the menu to find the Q&A button. To keep the questions relevant to most, please send any technical questions or matters that relate specifically to your business or operations to vu@esc.vic.gov.au and we'll respond to you directly. Thanks again for your attendance today. I'll hand over now to Commissioner Rebecca Billings to say a few words.
Thanks, Dan, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see such a strong turnout from the sector. You all play a critical role in the VEU program and delivering the intended environmental and consumer benefits. This year, the Commission has implemented significant changes to strengthen program integrity, protect consumers, and expand activities to support the government's electrification agenda. This includes new accreditation processes and standards, new assurance audits for accredited persons, new VEET scheme registry accounts, the telemarketing and door knocking bans, and the new induction cooktops activity. We do recognise that change is challenging for the industry, and we have increased our engagement and support to help you meet your obligations. As you know, more change is on the horizon with the government's strategic review of the program now underway. I encourage you to participate in this process and have your say. The Victorian Government has made it clear that as the VEU program plays such an important role in the energy transition and that it expects the highest standards from program participants. Our role at the Commission is to ensure those high standards are met, and we will be keeping and supporting you as we continue to embed these changes to strengthen the program. The annual accreditations process is a key tool to drive program integrity and protect consumers. We will use this tool to drive continuous improvement from accredited persons, installers, and other program participants, and to lift program standards overall. As we move into the next cycle of accreditations renewals, we will focus on the following things. Quality assurance. Ensuring you have a robust assurance processes to drive high standards of compliance in your operations. Complaints management. Ensuring you have effective complaints handling and dispute resolution processes to ensure consumers get good outcomes. Water heating, space heating, and cooling activities. These are increasing across the program, and we are paying close attention to ensure accredited persons have the appropriate skills and experience to be considered competent and capable and fit and proper. Accreditation conditions. We are increasingly using conditions to improve transparency and manage risk within the program. Compliance with these conditions is critical to maintaining your accreditation status. And finally, accredited persons must be able to demonstrate that they are complying with all aspects of the telemarketing and door knocking bans. We are actively monitoring program activity, investigating matters of concern, and taking enforcement action where we find evidence that the rules have been breached. This is important to protect consumers, maintain consumer and community trust in the program, and ensure a level playing field for you as program participants. We released our inaugural compliance and enforcement priorities earlier this year. This includes 3 enduring priorities and 3 strategic priorities, which are the heat pump and water heater installations, baseline manipulation, and telemarketing and door knocking. These areas remain a key focus area for our compliance and enforcement activities into the new year. We will review and publish our priorities each year and make sure we focus our resources on the right areas based on market intelligence and the current risks and trends that emerge. If you are aware of improper behaviour in the program that risks the integrity of the program or good consumer outcomes, you should report it to us. Together, we can strengthen the reputation of the program. Thank you all for attending today. I hope that you get a lot out of the session. I will now hand over to Carolyn Gill. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks very much, Commissioner Billings. Commissioner Billings has mentioned some of the regulatory reforms we've been implementing to ensure that the reputation and integrity of this VEU program. We will speak some more about some of those later, but first, we're going to provide a snapshot of some program data over the past 12 months. So, you'll see there, accredited persons 196. Now, there have been some changes in accredited persons over the past 12 months. That figure represents the total number of persons who've been accredited for some of all of that period. But we know not all of those have been active. We've had 127 accredited persons actively creating certificates in the past year. That's an increase of over 25% from the previous year. We have seen some accredited persons leave the program and some newly accredited or newly renewed persons not actively creating certificates yet. I do really want to call out that we have now had a record 199 applications for accreditation or renewal since 1 January this year. That is a substantial increase to the previous year. To put that 199 applications in perspective, in 2018, we had a low number of applications, only 7, 4 of which were ultimately withdrawn. And prior to 2024, the highest annual application number was 64. That was last year in 2023 when the renewal process was just starting. So more accredited persons than we anticipated have actually applied for renewal. So they're keen to continue participating in the program. And we've received many applications from people new to the program, leading to those 42 newly accredited persons approved in the past 12 months. That's around 60% more than we did in the previous year. Of course, those record numbers of applications come in the context of the renewal process, which is newly introduced, and the new fit and proper and competent and capable tests that Commissioner Billings mentioned, and we'll speak a bit more about those later on today. I'd also like to mention nearly 500,000 premises received upgrades through the VEU program during the period, with activities representing nearly 5 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emission savings. Continuing, while certificate creations have decreased somewhat, you'll see from this slide that the Commission has been working really hard to register certificates, and that the number registered, with the number registered in the past 12 months being higher than the number created. Last year, when we presented to you, we'd registered about 90% of the created number. In terms of withdrawals, that figure is significantly lower than the number we presented last year because there had been some errors that led to some significant withdrawals last year. But it's still a significant number, 309,000 there. So use this as a chance to remind accredited persons to check the accuracy of the certificates before creating. In the product approval space, again, we've had a substantial increase from the previous year, up over 30%. And in terms of PBA, there's been a big increase in PBA approvals, almost approaching double the number of approvals from the previous year. The inquiries we receive, as you'll see, it's a very large number. It is similar to last year, but happily our response times have really improved in getting back to those inquiries. So we'll mention that later as well. Looking to the kinds of activities that were undertaken in the previous 12 months, we've noted on the slide the top 12 kinds of activities that contributed to the creation of those nearly 5 million certificates being registered. Some activities have remained fairly constant. They're shown with the blue squiggle underneath. And we've seen a huge increase, around 1,500% from last year for space heating and cooling. You'll see that's been an extremely fast growing activity. Both gas efficiency and home energy rating assessments have shown large increases, about a tripling, but those come off a very small base from the previous year. Water heating activities have doubled and PBA activities have increased by more than 50%. There have been some declines in some activities, largely related to the regulatory settings. So lighting, as you know, has decreased following the removal of residential lighting and changes to the building-based lighting activities. And refrigerated cabinets has declined following changes to eligibility in that space. In-home displays has also decreased following a change to the BEAC calculation that was introduced. So moving on to our snapshot of compliance and enforcement matters. Our investigators have been busy in the past year and we expect to see more investigations and enforcement action. In the past year, you will see that 51 warnings have been issued. That's more than tripling from the previous year. That generally involves putting an accredited person on notice that if conduct is replicated, more serious enforcement action will be taken. Now, really importantly, those kinds of compliance actions are also recorded in the accredited person's compliance history, and we will be having regard to those, as Commissioner Billings mentioned earlier, in the part of any accreditation renewal assessment. You will see also on this slide that some restrictions and conditions have been imposed on accredited persons. Now, the ones on this slide are those that are imposed as part of an investigation outcome. But many accredited persons will be well aware that conditions are also used increasingly in the accreditations process. So at the time of the grant of initial accreditation or as part of the renewals process. You'll see that one accredited person was suspended in the past 12 months. In terms of surrenders by relevant entities, so energy retailers, over 95% of energy retailers' liabilities to surrender certificates were met. The shortfall penalties that came this year came in the context of high certificate prices, and we at the VEU at the Essential Services Commission have engaged extensively with energy retailers and accredited persons in relation to this issue. The department has also been engaging and has made a number of changes to support an increase in certificate creation, including increasing incentives and eligibility for space heating and cooling, and expanding eligibility for water heating upgrades. We've also been focusing on assisting accredited persons to comply. So, in terms of assisting compliance, we've produced more materials to help people comply and understand the requirements of the program. Just this month, we launched the Compliance Bulletin, which will consolidate emails that have previously been sent. This way, it's envisaged that all the information that you need is in one location and simplified. It simplifies our communications with you. In terms of VEU queries and complaints, I noted earlier that we get a very high number of queries. We've seen really improved response times. So early in the last financial year, the team worked really hard to improve those response times, and were able to resume what had been on pause for some time, but taking live calls so that we can respond really quickly to queries and complaints. Accredited persons may be aware of that through their own contact to us with queries, and also we obviously, when we receive complaints from consumers, we're actioning those, and we may be in touch with accredited persons to try and assist in those, to deal with those complaints. Compliance advice. So I mentioned earlier that the investigators have been busy. We have been actively providing guidance on requirements when we're closing out investigations, so really focusing on that as well. Our increased engagement includes webinars about key changes and requirements, like the telemarketing webinar that happened earlier this year, and the VEU audit webinar that happened in advance of the introduction of the new audit regime. We really value your opinions and feedback, and we've implemented multiple feedback surveys to gauge your input on how the program is running. Dan mentioned early on, thank you to those who contributed to the survey to help us set up the agenda for today. So thank you in general for participating as accredited persons in the annual survey that we ran earlier in this year, and these activities that we undertake help to improve our education and engagement work, and led to the introduction of the bulletin, and the webinars that we mentioned earlier. So in conclusion, we are seeing a change in mix of activities in the program, and that comes with a change of risk profile with some of those activities. We're seeing really strong interest from new accredited persons to join the program. And we've had lots of efforts from the Commission to support accredited persons complying in the program. So from the Commission's perspective, there have also been important developments in protecting scheme integrity, including via the accreditations audit and enforcement spaces. And we're going to speak more about those later. But for now, I would like to hand over to Stan Capan, who's the CEO of Solar Victoria, to talk to us about the strategic review. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this morning for the first time addressing this important forum. Solar Victoria sits as a group within the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action here in Victoria. Of course, the department is responsible for legislative policy and regulatory development that supports the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. Solar Victoria sits as a group. We also deliver the government's Solar Homes Program, which is a $1.3 billion program, as the name would suggest, supporting households to take up solar, a range of energy efficient appliances and batteries. We took on responsibility for the department's work supporting the Victorian Energy Upgrades in June, which includes a review. And so this morning I wanted to provide an update on our approach to the review, and then my colleagues Kirli Tyndall, who's the director of the BEU branch in Solar Victoria in DECA, and Maggie McNamara, who's the director of the strategic review, and myself will be around for questions during the session. As some of the speakers have already touched on, over 2.4 million households have benefited from the Victorian energy upgrades, and I might just move to the next slide, please. Since the program's inception in 2009, about 87 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emission has been abated in that time. It's an incredibly important program and is really one of the pillars that supports the government's net zero target by 2045. And over $600 million in incentives were made available in 2023, 2024, obviously in a market-based mechanism that fluctuates from year to year, depending on the price of certificates. 1.2 million energy efficiency certificates were created just in heating and cooling upgrades from over 16,000 households since that activity was introduced in May 2023. That activity and others and some of the substantive work program to reposition the program has really been, in the last couple of years, transforming the program away from very high uptake, low cost items such as weatherproofing and draft sealing and some of those and household lighting and some of those activities that were very important in the early days of the scheme to more complex, more costly appliances and upgrades that are really driving the government's electrification agenda. But there's more to be done. And so to ensure that the program is particularly well suited towards the government's policy commitments around gas substitution and electrification, and that it adapts to support the dynamic needs of households and businesses with their energy bills and reducing energy emissions, the government has announced a review of the program in May that is funded for the next 2 years, which will look at repositioning the program. It's a strategic review, so quite targeted and deliberately targeted towards making sure that the program is fit for purpose for the future, particularly with a view to electrification. It's not a root and branch review. It is really targeted and focused on essentially giving the program an upgrade and making it more modern in the context of the last 15 years. So what have we learned, but also what does the scheme need to adapt to and evolve to, particularly given the government has also stated its intention to support the program through legislative changes early next year, and a bill will be introduced to Parliament that extends the scheme to 2045. That intention of legislative change, which also includes some changes to the vintage rules and changes to the compliance and enforcement powers of the Essential Services Commission, are really backing in the program and demonstrating the government's confidence, but also wanting to make it clear that the program will be around in the longer term and has a really important role to play around emissions reduction. In terms of the scope of the review, the terms of reference have been released, and I'm sure will be familiar to many on the call today, but they're available from the link that's included there on our website. But it will include the purpose and the objectives of the program. That includes the objects in the Victorian Energy Efficiency Target Act, and obviously the objectives in the scheme to make sure that it's aligned with the government's policies and level of ambition around emissions reduction and energy efficiency, and indeed more broadly linking to renewable energy. We will look at the right metrics for the program in terms of what the program is delivering. That includes the unit of measure that underpins the certificates and whether tonnes abated is the right measure, given that most energy efficiency schemes in the world indeed link their unit of metric for the market-based certificates to an energy saved metric. But we'll also look at the broader suite of measures of success and have heard from stakeholders already about what some of those should be. It'll include the targets. The government has stated its intention to set targets only for 2026 and 2027, and the legislative change in early next year will support that, because generally, as you're probably familiar, those targets were set in 5-year blocks. We set only for the first 2 years of the next 5-year period, and that's to enable the review to inform the targets beyond 2027. We'll also look at the range of activities and products and indeed services that are provided under the scheme, the role of all scheme participants, but particularly the important role that the accredited providers play in the scheme, but we'll also look at things like aggregators and people who trade in certificates and other participants in the scheme that are important, and to see how they're represented in the Act and whether they should be represented in the Act, but also how they're managed within the legislative and regulatory context. We'll look at regulation and including compliance and enforcement, and also look at the costs and benefits of participation in the scheme, recognising that we all contribute to the costs of the Victorian Energy Upgrades program as consumers of energy, whether large or small, with very few exceptions, and that obviously it's in all of our interests and intention that the scheme operates as efficiently as possible with the least amount of cost. Next slide, please. In terms of the process for engagement around the strategic review, we've conducted more than 40 bilateral meetings and multiple meetings with some stakeholder organisations. 2 years might sound like a long time for a strategic review, but that's particularly because the government has already contemplated and made its intention clear that it will lead to legislative and regulatory change. And so the bulk of that 2-year period is looking at that. But we will also be looking at an integrated and seamless approach to our stakeholder engagement, so that those matters that are raised in our general consultation and indeed the consultations that the ESC undertakes in real time around how the program administers, and obviously we're constantly looking at continuous improvement, that anything that can't be adopted in that program of work will be adopted in the review, or at least considered in the review, and whether it should be adopted, and vice versa. Those matters that come up in consultations during the review, and indeed some have already led to changes, including that change that I referred to around the vintage review, the long-term signal that the program will be around for 2045 are reflections of the early consultation that we've had. A stakeholder reference group has been established and has now met 3 times and includes the Clean Energy Council, the Smart Energy Council, Energy Savings Institute of Australia, the Energy Efficiency Council, Australian Energy Council, Energy Consumers Australia, Environment Victoria, VCOS as the representative and peak body for social services and community services sector in Victoria, and also the newly created ANZ Water Heating Association. We're also working really closely with Dan and colleagues from the Essential Services Commission, who've been incredibly generous with their insights and supporting the review setup, and will continue to play an important role in informing the review and our directions. An initial public survey has been undertaken and 260 responses were received to that. That include members of the public, accredited providers, installers, industry organisations, peak bodies, consumer advocates and other scheme participants. And as I referred to, those bilateral discussions that we've had to date, and in some cases have been tailored and targeted towards particular stakeholder cohorts. And we've really let them do the driving about what works best for their members. We're also trying to make it as seamless as possible, recognising that many of the scheme participants in Victoria operate across state boundaries, and particularly in New South Wales, and understanding that there's a statutory review of the New South Wales East scheme and PDRS, that we're also looking at making it as easy as possible for stakeholders to engage in our review by accepting things like submissions that have been put forward for the New South Wales review. I understand South Australia is looking at a similar approach shortly, and that will take into account those views that are being represented and advocated for in other jurisdictions. I wanted to move then to some strategic themes that are emerging so far from the consultation, and these are really themes that are our summary of our very many conversations and some of the written material and research that has come forward to date. But I can assure you that we're also undertaking our own detailed analysis research. We're also commissioned research, very much thinking about going back to basics about how has the scheme performed since 2009, taking into account previous reviews, previous evaluations and some of the research that's been commissioned, taking a back to basics approach to emissions reduction and where the opportunities remain from both a benefits and a cost perspective for Victoria, recognising the very ambitious targets towards net zero by 2045, which will align with the end of the scheme, but also looking at energy efficiency opportunity, obviously, given that this is an energy saving scheme, and some of the demand management opportunities that exist as well. So all of that's being taken into account and synthesised with our stakeholder engagement as well. But a number of themes that are coming up to date, very much to consider an express reference to the electrification, to access, equity and efficiency in the objects of the Act and the scheme itself. That we should be looking at the right measures, and not only as the unit of measure for the certificates and for the market, if you like, that's created by the VEU, but also looking at, through international comparison, other measures of success, including whether CO2 abated is the right measure for the longer term, whether it's whether there should be an energy saving metric, and whether there should be complementary measures as well. We've also heard lots of views around the viability of sub-targets for vulnerable and low income consumers, and in particular hearing from advocates from VCOS and others and other community services organisations looking at how we might be able to make the program more accessible to very vulnerable cohorts to support them in the energy transition as well. And if there is a change to the unit of metric, what does that transition look like over what period of time to ensure that it is not disruptive to the market? We're looking at access to the scheme, as I mentioned, including across other lines, including about regional versus metro split. I know that's being explored in other jurisdictions as well, and indeed in South Australia they've already got measures that support those outcomes. Putting the customer first, really recognising the customer journey for different products, for different services, and what those traditional customer journeys and channels to market are, as well as those that are potentially more innovative or disruptive, and recognising that there are different customer journeys for different customer cohorts, including whether they're individuals and households, landlords, renters, or businesses, both small and large. And in particular, very much being encouraged to look at the demand side, which is something that we're looking at, and looking at the value of the demand side and demand reduction at different times of the day, including the link to emissions reduction metrics. Mainstreaming channels to market, including the consumer protections that are available for some products and appliances in that respect, improving the transparency of the program, both from a marketing and branding perspective, the attribution of the program and the incentives that are provided at point of sale, considering disclosure of incentives and margins at point of sale to improve the effectiveness of the scheme, and really to optimise and maximise the efficiency that's provided by the incentives, considering caps on AP fees, and indeed the role of other providers. Safety standards and quality as being the core, and lots of support for some of the changes that have been implemented over the last few years, and also recognising the need for integrity, both in the markets as well as the products and the services that are provided, and all scheme participants, which is the next point, that we should consider a holistic approach to all scheme participants. Lots been said. Lots of focus on the accredited providers, which is an essential ingredient to the delivery of the program, but also recognising that some services that have emerged over the years, like aggregators who are not necessarily installers, who perform an additional function within the scheme, are not reflected in the Act itself, and of course the role of traders, and in some case, considering that people play multiple roles at different times in different parts of the market. The role of demand reduction and time of use. And obviously we're looking very closely at the experience with New South Wales, and while the scheme has an object to encourage investment and innovation, recognising that there's a balance and that there are trade-offs between encouraging and investing in innovation and markets where there are no standards, or where standards are yet to be developed. In terms of the timelines, we're undertaking the data analysis, research and continued consultation now. Early in 2025, we'll release a discussion paper for broad consultation, which will include some of the themes that I've referred to already, and yet those that are yet to emerge, some of our research, some of our comparison with international interstate jurisdictions, and asking questions for feedback so that we're taking all of those matters into account before providing advice to the government in the middle of next year. And obviously from 2025 to 2026, the contemplation of both legislative and regulatory change. The Minister is very keen to look at a more dynamic approach to reform in this regard, and she's also, as I mentioned, looking at opportunities to transition the program towards electrification to make it easier and more accessible, and particularly with different cohorts. And I think in particular, some of the work that has been already referred to and some of the changes in the market, particularly around things like project-based assessments and how we streamline those so that they're more accessible for different cohorts where we know there's lots of work to be done yet on energy efficiency. And then my final slide is really on the point that I've made now a number of times, which is that the review will be complementary to the existing program of work. Some of you will be familiar with this chart, which is published on our website, which charts the program of work, if you like, that supports continuous improvement in the VEU. It includes legislative and regulatory changes and changes to activities and standards. You'll be familiar that on the 25th of October, the government announced an induction cooktop activity. We've already seen the first certificates created under that, and all sales from the 25th of October are eligible for incentives, and a number of APs are already providing services for customers to access those 2 certificates for replacement of installation, I should say, of induction cooktops in homes that are equipped with gas. We've also introduced co-payments and warranty requirements. There'll be more to say in coming weeks around consultation around the regulatory impact statement for the targets for 2020, 2026 and 27. Of course, the greenhouse gas reduction rates will be published shortly, and a number of other things that are in place, including some work we've been doing around reigniting really the household appliance activity to make it more accessible and to mainstream that in big box retailers and others in particular. We're also looking at embedding the program into the future in the legislation, which should be released early next year as a bill in Parliament, consumer protections, and really continuing this transformation of the program towards electrification at the same time as we're consulting heavily on the review. Thanks very much for your time this morning. I'll now hand to Kate Harvey, who's the Business Improvement and Information Management Lead at the ESC.
Thank you, Stan, and good morning, everybody. A little bit of change of discussion now. So we've been talking a lot about the strategic overview of the program. I am part of the project team implementing the registry technology upgrade. So I will be very techie focused. So we are building a new registry system on the Salesforce platform. So today my focus will be giving you a little bit of a sneak peek into, yes, we can go to the next slide, that's okay, into a sneak peek into the registry and how it's being built, as well as giving you a heads up as to the program of work that is coming and how you'll be involved and what you need to prepare for. Now, I am very well aware that my presentation today will probably raise more questions than it answers. So feel free to put questions in the chat. Most of them, I suspect, will be design, technical and logistical questions, which we won't answer today, but I'd be really grateful for them so that we can ensure we address them in our communications and consultation program coming over the next few months. So what's changing in the improved registry? So what we're trying to do is reduce the pain points of the program for entry into the program as well as ongoing participation. And that's not only for industry participants, but it's also for our VU staff as well, who work very, very hard to ensure the program goes well. So whilst we're trying to do that, we're also helping to ensure that the integrity of the program is not only maintained but improved, obviously protecting the consumer, and then that last point around enabling and ensuring the platform can take us forward and support the strategic outcomes of the review as well. So very much a future focused system we are trying to build. So what does this include, actually in reality? So hopefully a lot of you will be happy that we'll have online forms that you can save and return to later rather than document uploads for the accreditation, VSRA, renewals, etc. The request for further information when we do that for any application or for when you've submitted activities and we require further information will be through the account and through the registry portal, and will be attached to your account and activities and alike. So it's all managed within the portal itself. We'll enable self-registration of account holders as well, which will be very easily done. Saying that, anyone who is a current registered account holder will be migrated to the new system, so you don't need to re-register. We will do that for you. And self-registration of installers as well. And two good things that we're excited about, because we're techie people, is that there is an address lookup now for when you are inputting activities, and an ABN lookup as well, so we can ensure that we have one account for you as a business, and that we have the 360-degree view of you as a scheme participant. So the right-hand side just shows a little bit of a screenshot, a sneak peek into how we're being built. And this is one of our forms that we're building, accreditation forms. And anyone who has applied for a passport recently will see that it follows the same type of method, where you have sections along the left-hand side. You can complete the form as you go along, and a great feature is you can save for later. So you don't have to have everything all ready to go when you are starting to complete the form. And if we just click to the next screenshot, thank you. You'll be able to see all of your contacts within your account. So this includes your primary and secondary users, which you will be able to, again, self-register, and your installers as well. We are calling them scheme participants in this list. And so the next slide, we're going to talk about what is coming up and what else you should know. And I suspect, again, there will be lots of questions that will come out of this. So we have already asked your participation and sought interest in people who wish to participate in our consultations, which we are kicking off in December with the design portal question. So we have designed a prototype of the portal, and we will be asking for feedback on that for ease of use, etc. And that starts in December. Now, go live for the system is scheduled for the first half of 2025. So, you know, you look at now until the first half of 2025, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done within that time. So what we're focusing on will be consultations, will be testing, training, there will be forums, etc. So there is a program of work that we have designed and will be implementing to ensure that we bring you along the journey of transitioning to this new registry. That being said, this new, as all new systems are, they are disruptive when they are implemented. So we are aiming to keep disruption to the industry as well as the participants to an absolute minimum, but please do expect there will be some type of disruption. We will provide you with guidance on what you need to do to verify your new account into the system, and all of your information will be migrated to the new system, including your activities, your VEEKs, and your history of that. Now, the project team will closely monitor moving to go live as well as post go live. We call that hypercare, to ensure that any major issues are addressed quickly. As we've discussed today, this program is an essential program to the Victorian government, and we are very focused on ensuring that this go live as well as moving forward is as seamless as possible. One last thing I will say is that it will be a different system. I believe it's going to be one that is going to be more user-friendly for yourselves as well as our internal teams, but there's always that period of adjustment for us at the VU as well as the industry. So I would just say be very prepared for it. Look at the consultations and the communications we send out about the system and how it's being upgraded and what we need from you, so you can be as best prepared when we go live next year. And now I will hand over to Stephanie Morrow. Thanks.
Good morning. It's really lovely to be here. My name is Stephanie Morrow and I'm a Specialist Advisor in Regulatory Capability working here at the Essential Services Commission. I'm going to talk briefly to you about some of the successes we have seen tackling our compliance and enforcement priorities this year. And then I'll hand over to my colleague Caroline Gill to talk about some of the other work that we've done to improve program integrity this year. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Heidi. All right. You heard Commissioner Billings say in her address to you that this is the first year where the Commission has published its compliance and enforcement priorities for the year. And that's been a fantastic move toward the new regulatory posture that we've been taking, where we're really focusing on program integrity and excellent consumer experience in the program. So you're probably well aware that two of the strategic priorities that were chosen for this year were the quality of heat pump hot water installations, making sure that those are right the first time, every time, and also making sure that our incoming telemarketing and door knocking laws were complied with to the extent that we could ensure that would happen. So I want to talk to you about the outcomes we've seen so far in those two projects, looking first at the telemarketing and door knocking project. We had two primary aims for this, and this is a project that is still underway. Of course, our first aim was to ensure that the new laws were well understood by everybody, all APs and scheme participants, and also that they were followed by everybody. And that second part, that they're followed by everyone, we understand is really important to all of you, because when you are making those significant changes to your business to ensure that you're compliant, you want reassurance that there's a level playing field and that no one who is out there non-compliant is disadvantaging your business and getting an unfair advantage for themselves. So we understood how very important it was before the laws came into effect to engage directly with all of the APs who we knew were using telemarketing and wrap around them with support to understand the expectations of the Commission in adjusting to the new laws. Some of the successes that we've seen so far are a very significant reduction in telemarketing and door knocking complaints. So they have reduced by 39% post-ban implementation. We've also seen door knocking complaints reduce by 77% post-ban implementation. We're also really pleased that when we're going out and surveying consumers who have had activities undertaken, we're only getting 4% of consumers indicate that they may have received a cold call, whether that's telemarketing or door knocking. And quite a few of those consumers who think they may have, when we go and talk to them further, we realise that in fact the conduct occurred before the ban, or perhaps they did in fact give consent, someone has forgotten. So we're seeing a low level of consumers reporting this sort of misconduct, which we're really pleased about. We are also really pleased to report back to you that you've been fantastic in engaging with us. So we have had a really high number of APs and scheme participants call us, ask us to help them understand exactly how the rules work. And also, we've been really pleased to receive your tip-offs when you're aware of people who've not been complying with the rules. Those have been very helpful. So our work in the space is continuing, of course. We're into phase 2 of this project. We are going to keep doing our monthly surveys of consumers. We have multiple door knocking and telemarketing enforcement investigations on foot at the moment, and we're getting close to the end of those for a few of our investigations. And of course, you will hear about the outcomes of those in our compliance bulletins in the coming months. The next project that I wanted to report back to you on is the work we've been doing on heat pump hot water installations. So I'm sure you're aware that we were quite alarmed last year at some of the heat pump installations we were seeing come through that appeared to present some safety risks and also weren't providing good service to consumers. So we have joined with Solar Victoria, the Victorian Building Authority, the Energy Safe Victoria and WorkSafe to form a working group where we collectively look at this problem, we share intelligence, and we work together with our communications to industry to let you know what we're concerned about, what you need to do to improve standards if you're falling behind. And we've had a very significant program of reviewing installations happening this year. So again, the reason that we did that was to make sure that installations are compliant first time, every time. But again, to make sure that the playing field is fair, because those of you out there doing fantastic work were being really unfairly affected by the reputational damage caused by those small number of people doing poor installation work. So we've been pleased to see that while the heat pump hot water installations this year have substantially increased since last year, we've actually seen a 27% decrease in complaints about these products. Now, that reduction in complaints only exists if we ignore telemarketing complaints. So that is a factor that we're concerned about, and that's something that we're looking very closely at the moment, is why is the telemarketing issue persisting in the hot water space? It seems to be the main space where we're still seeing telemarketing problems. But if you take that out of the equation and you just look at complaints about the products themselves and the level of service received, we've seen this 27% decrease in complaints. So what that means, when you look at the increase in the installations and the decrease in the complaints, is we've gone from 1.23% of all residential and small business installations resulting in a complaint for the 2023 period to, in the last 12 months, we've seen that drop to just 0.51% of installations receiving a complaint. So we're pleased to see that. The journey is still continuing. There's still work to do to uplift performance, but we're already seeing fantastic improvement in this space. So our work is continuing. We're going to keep working with our fellow agencies. We've got more joint communications coming out to you. We have just completed a batch of 503 reviews of installations here at the Essential Services Commission, and we're analysing the results of those. We will communicate what we've learned to you shortly. And if you have any feedback for us on what you're seeing out there, of course, as always, we're really keen to hear from you. I'm now going to hand over to Caroline Gill, our Director of Regulatory Operations, to talk about some of the other work we've been doing to increase the integrity of the VU program. Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Stephanie. So coming back to implementing regulatory reform to improve program integrity, we're looking at accreditations. Now, if you're an accredited person in the program, you will have this week received an update with new forms for renewal processes. They're designed to streamline that application process and assessment process. So over the past 12 months, we have done a lot of work in implementing these new fit and proper and competent and capable tests and the annual accreditation renewal process. I really would commend that email that you've received earlier this week to you to have a look at. But today I just want to mention, in relation to those future focus elements, compliance with conditions on your accreditation is really important. Internally, we've set up monitoring processes within the Commission to make sure that we can monitor accredited persons' compliance with their conditions. And for some accredited persons, if you've got conditions on your accreditation, it will be important that you also establish processes to ensure compliance with those conditions. We'll be taking your compliance into account at renewal time. In appropriate cases, we may also take enforcement action in relation to any non-compliance with conditions. We're also looking to accredited persons to use their quality assurance and complaints data to make improvements where necessary. I won't say too much more on that because I'm conscious of the time today, and I want to move on to the next slide, which is in relation to the new audit processes that have been introduced. These arose also out of some legislative reform, and we've been implementing in the course of this year. So the assurance audits and the compliance audits. There's the assurance audits apply to all accredited persons. The ESC is required to publish an audit schedule, which we did back in June. And under that schedule, every accredited person must undertake an assurance audit at least once every 2 years. We update that schedule. Obviously, there have been new accredited persons, as I spoke to earlier this year, and there have been some which were inactive and they've continued to be active. So we'll be updating that schedule, and we notify accredited persons when it's their turn to undertake an assurance audit. The assurance audits get undertaken by auditors approved by the ESC. So another step we took earlier this year was to appoint a number of auditors to the VEU approved list of auditors. There have been 9 appointed for assurance and compliance audits. In the past, we have had a list of auditors relevant to relevant entities, so energy retailers, and we've got currently 10 auditors on that separate list for annual energy acquisition statement audits. So we published that, and we've begun conducting these assurance audits. We've commenced round 1 and 2 of those assurance audits. So accredited persons have received their notices, and for round 1 also provided their report to us. We've also started undertaking the compliance audits. Compliance audits are a separate tool that can be used when the Commission has a suspicion that there have been rules that haven't been followed. There is a tool that allows us to either undertake ourselves or to require an accredited person to look into a particular matter by way of one of the auditors on the list of approved VEU auditors. These assurance audits, but also the compliance audits, together with the new accreditation rules and processes, and together with other regulatory improvements like the telemarketing and door knocking bans, are really important to protect the integrity and reputation of the program. Happily, as we heard earlier from Stan, the program is intended to operate until at least 2045. It's very important to us and to all of us that the reputation of the program is maintained and consumer trust also is maintained. As the program moves into more complex activities, as we heard from Stan and we heard earlier in the snapshot update, those activities, particularly at the residential level, these tools, accreditation, audit, will help to manage those risks. As you know, maintaining the reputation and integrity of the program is really crucial for the program's ongoing success. I now want to hand back to Stephanie Morrow, who's going to be facilitating questions and answers. So hopefully you've got your questions in. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Hello again. So thank you very much, Caroline. We've now got our question and answer segment, the most exciting part of the morning. We're lucky to have 3 people on our Q&A panel this morning. We've got Dan Keeley, our VU Executive Director at the Commission here. And we also are lucky to have 2 people joining us from DECA. We've got Kiralee Tyndall, Director of VU at Solar Victoria. We also have Maggie McNamara, Director of the VU Strategic Review at Solar Victoria. I'm going to run you through quickly a reminder of how to submit questions in case things have come to your mind that you haven't had time yet to add. So you can submit a question in writing or by raising your hand to ask a question to camera. It's shown on the screen here. What you need to do is select the Q&A button and then post your question. If you want to ask a question on camera, select raise hand in the menu. You'll have to make sure that you unmute your microphone when I say your name and give you the time to air your question. If you're on a mobile device, just click on the 3 dots to find the menu options. Now, if you see a question that you think is really important and you want answered, please like the question so we can see how popular it is and make sure we prioritise it. Any very specific or technical questions that aren't likely to be useful for the broader cohort are probably best sent to us at our email address that you'll know very well. It's there on the screen, and we'll respond to you directly. If we find that there are quite a few similar questions, we might group them together. And simple questions, we might just type responses in writing in the Q&A window. We might not get to all the questions today. If that's the case, we'll share responses to those unanswered questions on our website after the forum. Now, I know you're very excited to ask questions, but we are very excited to hear your feedback on today's forum. And we know that if we ask you to fill in the survey now, we've got more of a chance of getting your response because you're all very busy people, and once you leave the forum you may not have time to do it. So I'm going to sneakily take a break for a minute here and ask you to complete our forum survey. There's a link at the top of the Q&A window. Your feedback will tell us what we've done well today, what we can improve for next year's forum, and we absolutely take your feedback on board. It's very important to us. So we're going to start a 1-minute break. Please click on the survey and complete it, and I'll tell you when the minute is up. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to complete that survey for us. I know that our engagement team will be very eagerly reviewing those this afternoon. So thank you for taking that time. We really appreciate it. Now, I can see we have quite a few questions. We have until past, so let's see how many of these we can get through. First question, excuse me, that I've got is from James at AEA. He has written, current program landscape appears to be heavily skewed toward owner-occupier homes. What measures or program adjustments does the ESC believe could make a genuine, scalable impact on improving energy efficiency for renters and social housing residents, ensuring equitable access to lower energy bills and increased comfort? What a great question. I think that our DECA counterparts can best answer this one, but I'll ask you to address it first, Dan.
Thanks very much, Steph, and thanks, James, for the question. I think if we look sort of historically at the program, it has tried to balance those separate demographics, and through the use of LED lighting upgrades, low flow shower roses, draft ceiling and the like, there continue to be some areas where there remains access for renters. But I think that's a good point, James. We are seeing a structural shift in the program towards electrification activities, and naturally they are more inclined to be supported by the landlord and need the landlord's financial investment and approval to participate as well as the renters. So I think if you look across the history of the program, there has been a pretty good track record in access for renters and other households. But as you say, with the structural shift in the program, there probably is more work to do. So perhaps over to Kira-Lee or Maggie for some further comments.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Look, that was really helpful, and I think I'd support that, but acknowledge that DECA is very cognizant of the impact of the VEU program on all Victorians, not just owner-occupiers, but renters as well. As part of preparatory work for the VEU targets, the 2026 and 27 targets, regulatory impact statement, which will be coming out later this year, DECA has undertaken an evaluation of the program, and I am pleased to confirm that we've found that uptake in the program for rental households is proportionate to the rental households in Victoria, and also that uptake for regional and rural households in Victoria is also proportionate to the number of Victorians that live in regional and rural Victoria. Certainly, we are cognizant of that, and we are undertaking engagement activities to make sure that we can raise awareness for the program and opportunities for rental households as well, engaging with strata managers, with councils and with rental providers as well, to make sure that we are advocating for upgrades in those households.
All right, thank you so much, Kira-Lee. We have a hand up from Katerina. Katerina, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question to our panel. I'm not sure if you can hear me, Katerina. I'll give you another moment, and otherwise I'll move to the next question. Oh, here we go. No? All right, I'm going to move to our next question. We almost have Katerina. We just have her gorgeous penthouse suite.
Oh, hi, sorry. I asked the question in written form as well. Just wanting to know where VEECs, the quantity of VEECs, will there be any changes over the coming year? Anticipated changes.
Might ask you to start our answer to that, Dan.
Yeah, look, Katerina, I take it from your question, you're talking about VEEC supply, is that right? The overall VEEC supply, or are you talking about VEECs in relation to a particular activity?
In relation to a particular activity.
There have recently been some changes for space heating and cooling and water heating, which have recognised that some additional efficiency is associated with some of those installations, and us in the department are constantly working on tweaking the settings to make sure that there's climate integrity in the VEECs attributable. So I can't say there won't, because we're keeping a steady eye on ensuring that the activities that generate VEECs represent genuine efficiency savings and abatement, and where we see opportunities to tweak those to improve the scheme, we seek to make those changes. Perhaps I'll throw to you, Kiralee, for any further comments.
Thanks, Dan. That was a really helpful answer. I guess I would add to that answer, Katerina, by saying that the program inherently is market-based. And so while we certainly have levers in place to support the acceleration of certificate creation and uptake, it is largely dependent on accredited providers to create those certificates. We do have activities in place to increase demand from consumers, to Dan's point, with heating and cooling, with hot water. But ultimately, it is up to accredited providers to help facilitate those in market as well.
Thanks, Kiralee. I've got a couple of questions here that are still on this topic, so I might ask them straight away. We have one from Rod Woolley, who has asked when we'll see the consultation paper on proposed VEU targets for 26-27. He is of the belief that it has to be locked in no later than May 2025. Could you answer that one, Kiralee?
Absolutely. And yes, Rod is correct. The targets do need to be set before May 2025. And I can confirm the department is still planning on issuing a regulatory impact statement in the coming weeks for that.
Perfect. All right. The next one on VEECs is from Martin Salazar. He asks, looking at the creation numbers, it's likely the 2025 target will fall short by at least 2 million VEECs. Can DECA provide any feedback as to how creation levels will increase? Is that something you can comment on, Kiralee?
Yeah, absolutely. DECA is monitoring the market quite closely in certificate creation levels. We are also working very closely with the Essential Services Commission to identify additional opportunities for certificate creation. We've had a number of recent changes already, so recent additions to incentives for commercial heating and cooling, additional incentives for large cold rooms, increasing products for heating and cooling that are eligible. And we've recently introduced a new activity for induction cooktops. We are undertaking a significant program of work, in particular industry engagement, to really identify additional supply chain to come through for the program and consumer awareness. And we will be publishing an upcoming program of work for 2025 in the coming weeks as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I have a question here about telemarketing and door knocking. It is from James of AEA again. So he asks, he says, telemarketing and door knocking have been effective in engaging with disengaged audience around energy efficiency. With the ban in place, how does the Commission envisage bridging this gap to ensure ongoing engagement with this cohort? What alternative strategies or supports does the Commission believe could be employed to balance occupant comfort with the need for impactful outreach? Dan, can you speak to that one?
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, and thanks again, James. I think I'll acknowledge up front that the bans on telemarketing and door knocking were really born out of very strong community feedback that they'd had enough of those marketing techniques, and we're probably not alone as an industry who has found themselves with bans in place for our activities. Since the bans have come into place, and even before the bans have come into place, we've seen APs and other scheme providers explore other avenues to market. We see a lot of social media presence, we've seen newspaper ads, we've seen pop-ups in shopping centres and the like, as well as, I think, another strategy which we're seeking to pursue, which is really about mainstreaming access to the program, access via established tradies, established retailers, as well as specialists that are sort of VEU specialists in the program. And one example of that is the introduction of induction cooktops and their availability via big box retailers. And that's the goal in some respects, to mainstream this access so that it doesn't always need to be by a specialist VEU channel or a specialist VEU provider.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. I've got a question from Sam, who asks, how will the Commission treat finance payments regarding the coming minimum co-payment requirements? If the customer has to pay $1,000 outside of finance, and I think by that he means if they have to pay $1,000 without entering into a credit arrangement of some sort, this may present a significant barrier to consumers participating in the VU program. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Steph. And Sam, look, I'll take the question as being whether or not the imposition of the co-payments will represent a barrier to consumers participating. I think that's at the heart of the question. The introduction of the co-payments is really to ensure that consumers have got skin in the game, and particularly as we're seeing a shift into more high-risk activities, which really represent essential services for people's homes, heating and cooling, hot water and the like. We want to make sure that consumers have got skin in the game in what are really significant purchases. So finance payments to support that would have to be strictly supporting a really good customer outcome. But I might also seek Kira Lee's view on the use of finance payments.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry, I've got some tricky mic mute button today. Look, I'd agree with that. I think ultimately the inherent rationale for a co-payment is that we do want to make sure consumers are protected. We want to make sure they're engaged with their purchasing decision. We want to make sure that they're confident the product they're getting from you is the product that's right for them. And so certainly where there are issues where finance is offered, we'd want to be assured that those considerations have been talked through with the customer and the customer is confident that the product is right for them. So we'd probably need to take that on notice and have further discussions between ourselves and the Commission as to how we get that confidence from accredited providers.
Thanks, Kira Lee. We've got Usman in the audience with his hand up. Usman, would you mind unmuting yourself? Just remember that step, very important, and letting our panel know your question. You're still muted. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
Thanks.
Good day, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for making this happen. So for the fresh ups like us, I have a very basic question. So if you could, help me out. So we already doing like solar installation for some like 10 years, and the company, I was trying to do the application, the VEU application, right? So it was as such, could we request for like a template? Like it's so terribly hard for someone like out of the, I'm so sorry, but could we request for some sort of like template for that, please? And I have another question. Actually, I tried doing the application some 2 years back, but because of the such a detailed thing there, I was just, there was a time when I just gave up. So yeah, so at that time the fees were like $500 for the VEU AP, but is it like increased to $3,000 now? And I've got one more quick question, if you could help me. So the solar business is in my mom's name. So What if because I was seeing like for example national police check, so police check, so or each applicant would be required to submit the national police check. So would that be safe if I'm helping go run this application, do the application? So would me and my mom both be required to submit the police check, please?
Thanks for the question, Asman. We have a dedicated support team. You can contact them by email or phone. Those details are provided on the slides that will show again after this session, and we can absolutely help you through all those things. Dan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, look, thanks, Usman, for the question, and thanks, Steph. I think the changes that were introduced in the middle of 2023, and both Commissioner Billings and Caroline spoke to these as well, are really setting an expectation from the government to program participants and the community at large that we're raising the bar for program participation. And the two requirements, fit and proper person and competent and capable, we need to have those two tests met by applicants demonstrating that they're really across the policies, the regulations, the laws, the rules that apply to them in their operations. And so while I appreciate that the application process has changed significantly, and you're right, the application fee is now $3,000, we have raised the bar, and that it is really important for us that if you're seeking to undertake activities that involve, electrical works or plumbing and the like, that you've got clear policies in place to make sure you comply with the regulatory requirements. And also we want to be really satisfied that you've got strong quality assurance processes and strong complaints management processes to really protect consumers and the integrity of the program. That said, we have also received feedback on the length and the approach to the accreditation forms. And earlier this week, we released what is now version 3 of our updated accreditations forms, which really simplify and streamline the accreditation process for new applicants, for renewals, and for variations. So, Usman, would absolutely welcome your email into the VU inbox if you've got more specific questions. But I think broadly, we are pretty clear that the accreditation process is such an important step, and the annual renewal process is such an important step in maintaining high quality providers within the program, that we will continue to use it in a way which really rigorously tests fit and properness and competent and capable.
Thanks, Dan. I'm looking at the time. I think we can squeeze in one last question, but I am also looking at a spreadsheet of quite a lot of fantastic questions. So I think we will need to answer some of these after the seminar, and we can publish some responses on our website. The last question we have time for today is from Vanessa Moskal. She asks, there's a concern for supply of VEECs into the future for energy retailers. Are new activities being considered in the strategic review? What targets are being considered in the strategic review that are reasonable given supply issues in the VEEC market?
Thanks,
Maggie,
Steph.
is that one you can answer? Oh,
Steph, I might take that one,
you.
yeah, and apologies for having to leave to take a call. I think I mentioned that in my presentation that we will absolutely be looking at activities, and we'll also be looking at the targets for those years beyond 26, 27. And so that's very much within the scope, and we welcome input into those. And it's partly the reason for the breadth of the stakeholder reference group is to take a really broad view of the evidence base around not only energy efficiency opportunities and emissions reduction opportunities, but also demand initiatives. I know, monitoring the questions, that there's a lot of questions around demand initiatives, and that's something that we're very alive to and that we see as being really critical to the future of the scheme.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stan. That brings us very near to the end of our time. So I'm going to hand back to our Executive Director, Dan Keeley, to deliver some closing remarks. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, panel members, for being part of that Q&A. And as you said, Steph, there are more questions than we had a chance to get to, but we commit to responding to those and publishing those responses on our website. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy days to attend the forum. We We really appreciate it and we hope you got a lot out of it. It's clear there's a really strong industry appetite to both participate in the program, see it grow and succeed, adapt and expand to meet the current challenges and structural changes in the program. As other Commission speakers and DECA speakers have touched on today, we'll continue to engage and support industry to participate and comply with the program, as well as be part of its evolution. If you haven't already, please take a chance to fill in that short survey about today's forum. We really value your feedback and this will help inform future sessions. Of course, if you have further questions, please get in touch with us using the contact details for VU on the screen. If you've got any further questions or assistance, we're really keen to support you. Thanks again. Thanks to my colleagues for joining us for presentations. We look forward to engaging with you in 2025 and wish you all a safe and happy holiday period. All the best.